A 26-year-old mother is accused of feeding her new baby so little formula that he was slowly starving to death. And if it weren't for another adult's intervention, that 2-month-old baby would likely be dead. We are taking a closer look at this absolutely heartbreaking case and the insane excuses reportedly given by the mother during an interview with police. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. A caseworker in Evansville, Indiana, says a 2-month-old baby that was brought to the emergency room by a Good Samaritan looked like a Holocaust survivor. That is how badly malnourished this little boy was. He was immediately taken in to get him back on the right track, but he was in absolutely dire condition. On November 6th, an Indiana Department of Child Services case manager was called out to the hospital. Reporting indicates again that this baby was suffering from malnutrition, starvation, dehydration. You come to find out that baby actually weighed less on that day than he did on the day that he was born, by 2 ounces. When he was born in August, he weighed 6 pounds 8 ounces. When he showed up at the hospital on November 6th, he weighed 6 pounds 6 ounces. I want to read you what it says from the probable cause affidavit in this case, because it kind of gives you a, unfortunately, better perspective of what we're talking about here. So it says the victim was taken by his mother, Kristen Donay, for a regular checkup on September 11th, 2024, and was found to be underweight. A follow-up appointment was scheduled for 4 weeks later, but was canceled by Donay, and no attempt was made by Donay to reschedule the appointment. Now, the caseworker reported that while he was at the hospital, he could actually see the baby's skin hanging off of his arms, loose skin on his legs and his torso too. He also found out that it wasn't Donay who brought the baby to the hospital. Remember I said that Good Samaritan? It was apparently a friend of Donay's who'd been worried about this child. And when Donay gets a call that her baby was being admitted, she finally arrives hours later. This is according to the affidavit. And Donay seemed to have a hard time confirming for the medical staff exactly how much she was feeding her baby and how often. At first, she said that she was feeding him 1 ounce of formula 6 times a day, but then later changed her story to say that she was feeding the victim a higher amount. And going back to that affidavit, when the case manager spoke with the attending physician, the doctor, quote, confirmed that the baby boy was diagnosed with dehydration and emaciated temporal waste in the eyes and cheeks resulting from malnutrition. An example provided in the report of emaciated temporal waste is the sunken cheeks and eyes of Holocaust victims suffering from starvation and malnutrition. And while they were staying in the hospital, the medical staff reportedly discovered that Donay wasn't even feeding her baby overnight. The staff would have to handle those feedings. According to the affidavit, after testing and observation by medical staff, it was determined that the victim didn't suffer from any medical conditions that would have caused the weight loss, so that will not help her defense. We'll talk about that in a minute. But this baby was removed from Donay's custody when he was discharged from the hospital. By the way, he'd already started to gain weight, more than a pound in just a few days. He was placed with a foster family, and by the time he got his next checkup, he gained a whopping 3 pounds just from proper care and nutrition. Is it that hard? Now, just to get some perspective on this for you, according to doctors at that hospital, if the friend hadn't intervened when she did and brought this baby to the hospital, he would have died. He would have died of starvation. That's what they have suggested. Now, the deputy who wrote up this probable cause affidavit says that he sat down with Donay to get some more information. And the affidavit states that Donay said that she gave birth to the victim in August in Indianapolis, then moved to Evansville to stay with the friend who brought the baby to the hospital. So the friend seems to be kind of like a roommate. And in the affidavit, the baby is referred to as V1 or Victim 1. And she told the deputy that there hadn't been any complications with his birth and he had no medical problems up till now. It reads, Kristen advised Victim 1 had experienced difficulty with digesting formula when fed and would spit up the majority of what he ingested shortly after eating. Kristen advised she was aware that V1 was not eating properly and as a result not being provided the essential nutrients that an infant of his age would require. Donay told the deputy that while she was feeding the baby 1 ounce of formula 6 times a day, she doesn't know how much he was actually able to keep down without spitting it up. And she said that she just waited to take him to a scheduled visit, but then, didn't take him to his follow-up appointment, even after she noticed he was losing weight. She also admitted she never took him to the emergency room, despite the fact that he was obviously getting worse. And this next part of the affidavit, for me at least, is just honestly infuriating. It reads, Kristen advised her friend was the person who decided to take V1 to the hospital for treatment on November 6, 2024, while she remained home to rest after working her shift at Dollar General store. Kristen advised she generally worked 15 to 20 hours per week at Dollar General store. Kristen advised she had numerous things going on in her life and work as reasons for not taking V1 to the hospital after noticing that he was losing weight and not thriving. Isn't that just great? So look, it is no secret I don't like talking about these kinds of cases. They actually make me angry when I see cases about children. But I will tell you, it is important to cover, especially in bringing awareness to what might be happening out there. You see something like this? I mean, here you have a roommate apparently realizing something was wrong and stepping in. So it is our privilege to be able to bring you a story like this, as unfortunate as it is. And one of the reasons that we're able to produce a show like this is because we have amazing support from our sponsors. And for this episode, that is Morgan & Morgan, really proud partner for us. This is America's largest injury law firm. And here's the deal. They have a dedicated team of over 1,000 attorneys. They have an incredible track record, like recent verdicts of $12 million in Florida, $26 million in Philadelphia. These are higher than the highest insurance offers in these cases. There's no upfront fee. They only get paid if you get paid. And the whole process can be done straight from your smartphone. It's so simple. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar. And the affidavit says that Kristen admitted multiple times that she knew her baby was getting worse and that he would die if he didn't get help. But she also reportedly admitted to taking just one step to try to improve his condition. She added rice to his formula. I don't know why she did that, but didn't really make anything better. And Donay was arrested on 2 charges of neglect of a dependent resulting in serious bodily injury. It's our understanding these are third-degree felonies. A bond of $25,000 cash or $250,000 surety was set by a judge in this case, and so far it appears Donay has not made bail. If she does, she is not allowed to have any contact at all with her baby, and attorneys are next scheduled to appear in court in December for an update in this case. I want to bring on Andrea Lewis, former felony prosecutor, trial attorney, law enforcement analyst, and sex crimes attorney out in Florida. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Can I just get your initial thoughts at this case? I think I laid out everything that we know so far.
You did, and thanks for having me on, Jesse. This is really disturbing, right? As mothers, as parents, we have one job. It's to keep our children safe, to make sure they get proper medical care. And in this day and age, it's not that difficult, given that the hospital these days gives a lot of education to parents while they're there after giving birth. And here, this woman, despite having just given birth, despite knowing that there was something wrong with her child, that the child is not eating, the child's losing weight when it should be gaining weight. I mean, those are all really alarming signs. And the fact that she just sat back, clearly decided that she had other priorities in her life that were more important and that this was not one of them is really disturbing. And the prosecutors in this case and the police did the right thing.
And what a hero that friend, that roommate is, because as I said, if she didn't do this, there is a strong chance that baby would have died. And I don't know if you've seen cases like this before, where it just takes a good Samaritan, someone to step up, see something's wrong, to save a life.
Absolutely. And, this happens a lot with either young dependent people, such as children, infants, or even elderly people who are sitting in their own filth and who just need somebody to speak for them and to come out and get the help that they need. And, we as people in the community, that's our job. That's our responsibility to speak up and advocate for people who are not able to do so themselves. And I'll tell you something else, Jesse. I have 2 small children, and having just gone through this process, I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. I can tell you, I remember one gets a stuffy nose or one gets a temperature that's a little higher than they should. I was the first person to call it, either take them to the doctor, take them to the hospital, probably far more so than I even needed to. But just that instinct as a mom to say, oh my gosh, I have to do anything and everything. I'd rather err on the side of caution than take a chance. It really, this case just strikes a chord because it makes absolutely no sense. I can't imagine looking at your child, your helpless little infant, and not knowing that there was a problem and not doing something to help them.
By the way, not to take away from the seriousness of this, but as you were saying that, I think I heard your baby in the background. I think I heard your child in the background. So I mean, the timing of that was pretty interesting. But no, I just want to ask you about this because in terms of prosecuting a case like this, I have to feel this is one of, and when I say easier, I'm not talking about the subject matter. The subject matter is incredibly difficult for anyone to process, and especially for a jury to hear and to see these kinds of photos, and for a prosecutor to prosecute as well. But in terms of the difficulty of actually securing a conviction here, I have to imagine it is relatively more straightforward than other cases. Look, she's innocent until proven guilty, but it's kind of hard to say that when you have a victim who is so young and so helpless. This is not a case of self-defense. This is not a case of an adult victim where there's some sort of other explanation. I feel the amount of defenses are limited here. So would you say that prosecuting a case like this would be relatively straightforward?
They are very straightforward, absolutely. And I'll tell you that the common defense, if you will, I'm using that term loosely here, that you see in a lot of these cases is that the person did not have the cognitive ability or the intellectual capability to know that their child or their elderly parent or whatever the case may be needed this additional help or support. And so one of the things that is going to be really important in this case is that September 11 doctor's appointment. I would be very curious about what those doctors, what advice they gave, because they are going to be critical witnesses here. Knowing that they gave a follow-up appointment, I am sure that they gave her steps and things that she needed to do. Call if the child's not gaining weight, try XYZ. And if that doesn't work, call back. And the fact that she did not follow through with doctor's instructions, the fact that she didn't take any of those steps, and to the contrary, actually canceled the appointment, is really going to be telling and probably very important in this case. So you are right. I mean, obviously the child can't talk, but I think, as you noted earlier, something else that's just very telling is the roommate takes one look at the child and says, oh my gosh, we've got to get this baby medical care. How did mom not recognize that for 2 months? I mean, to me, that's astonishing.
Well, there are these allegations that she was recognizing her baby was in trouble and the condition was getting worse. That knowledge component, that again, I think if we talk about what potential defenses there could be here, whether it's a mental health defense on her part, it seems though she recognized what was going on. So talk to me about, would there be a sort of mental health defense? And also let me ask you, what other defenses could there be? Because again, taking these allegations as true, she knew what was happening.
Yes, and based on what little we know so far, I don't see there being any type of insanity defense. I mean, I don't think we're there. She doesn't appear to be remotely close to that. So, I mean, in terms of a defense or these types of what I'll call mitigation factors, many times defendants raise those solely for the purpose of trying to get a lesser sentence. Is, look, I did this. I didn't mean to do this. I probably should have done better, but I'm just, with the limited knowledge I have, that's the best I could do. And that may not get them out of trouble, but I think that many times they're hoping that a judge will take that into consideration and say, look, hopefully they won't do it again. They need education, counseling, probation, and just maybe hoping that the judge won't throw the book at him. But in this case, I mean, she's done enough to know, to show her knowledge about that there was in fact a problem here. And I think that's going to be very difficult for her to get around if the case does in fact go to a jury.
That's what I was going to ask you. Do you think there's an incentive for the prosecution to try to have her plead guilty to this? And because do you really want this to go to trial? Do you want to subject a jury to all of this information, these kind of photos? Do you want to have to prosecute a case like this? Do you think what would that look like about offering some sort of plea or suggesting that she take a plea? What would that look like? And is there an advantage? Do you think there's an incentive, I should say, for prosecutors to try to make sure this doesn't go to trial?
Well, so a plea would really depend largely on her prior criminal record. I have seen neglect cases that get probation. It's a third-degree felony. So generally speaking, a third-degree felony is punishable by up to 5 years in prison. So it really depends. If she has no criminal record, I cannot imagine this being a circumstance where there's any type of pretrial diversion program where she would get out of the charges. But are prosecutors going to throw the book at her and sentence her to a long prison sentence? Probably not. And I say that only because this child does not, from what we know, appear to have a father figure in his life. And so I can imagine that is going to, unless the kid is going to be signed over and adopted by a relative or a loving foster family of some sort, the child's welfare needs to be taken into consideration as well. And I'm sure the prosecutors will be doing that. So hopefully there is a family friend or somebody responsible who can come in and take proper care of the child moving forward. But to your question about an incentive to lock in a conviction, I mean, there's always an incentive to do that, right? Because jurors, no matter what the case is, and no matter how clear the evidence may be, you never know what a jury's going to do. There could be a hung jury. You just never know. So in order to lock in a conviction, hopefully get mom too under some type of a court supervision, long-term supervision, where she's required to, let's say, bring the baby in for checkups, go see a probation officer, get either mental health counseling or maybe even parenting classes. The court can have that hammer hanging over her head if they have her on some type of long-term supervision, like a probation or an ankle monitor. That's probably what this looks like.
Will she ever see her son again?
That'll be up to a judge. So what generally happens in these cases is, of course, if she's in custody, she's not going to be taking care of her kid. But ultimately, this case will, depending on what happens with the criminal case, it'll work its way through the family court system, and ultimately, a judge is going to have to determine whether she is a fit mother. They'll have to have her evaluated and ultimately make that determination. But that is also a long process. That's not something that happens immediately. And regardless, she may have supervised visits or things of that nature until a determination is made.
Kind of hard to fathom that she would ever be in her child's life again, considering what these allegations are. It's hard for me, again, to say allegations. They are allegations, but my gosh, the evidence so far against her is just so strong and equally disturbing. Andrea Lewis, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time. Go back, take care of your little one in the background. I think I don't know if it's your son or daughter, but I think they want to be a star. They want to come on TV with you. They heard They were being referenced. They're like, let me come on.
It is. It's my son, and one day we'll have him on one day, right, Jesse?
Sounds good.
Have a good one.
All right, everybody, what a case. Thank you so much for joining us here on Sidebar. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.